So one of the questions I hear with some frequency and certainly think about on my own is monogamy possible in long-term relationships? Like, can you really just have sex with one other person for the entire rest of your life? I mean, like, that wasn't a huge, like, freak out moment for me at my wedding, but I know for a lot of people it is. It's like, oh, is that going to be the last piece of tail that I ever seen? And if you're like me and you grew up in a religious setting that prioritized monogamy and you're told you're a good boy or a good girl for keeping it in your pants and only giving it to that one other person, this can be a really difficult idea to unpack. So today I want to explore the idea, is monogamy possible? And if yes or if no, what can we do about it? So hey, if we haven't met before, I'm Kay. This is Ecstatic Self. Pleasure to be here. Please do take a moment, hit the subscribe button along with the button next to it to be alerted about upcoming videos. One person, Are humans meant to be monogamous? Can we make that work? Is that physically possible? Short answer, no. Long answer, maybe. Now, there are people who make this the subject of their research, and I highly recommend searching for YouTube videos and TED Talks about people who make this their life's work. It is something that I am curious about, and it is something I've taken a little bit of time listening to and reading these individuals. And from what I gather, that most people who are in a long-term romantic relationship, where they're not having sex with other people, at least that's what they say, usually one of a few things happen. One, the term bed death, or someone will just say the spark dies out, which is not a terrible thing depending on the level of passion at the beginning of a relationship. There's plenty of very successful relationships that go on for years and decades where the relationship is more about companionship and communication and just enjoying each other's company. And there are people who have had very successful even mariage blancs, marriage with no sex. George Bernard Shaw, the famous playwright and essayist, an example of somebody who loved his wife, never had sex with her, loved her nonetheless. Of course, in modern times we would say, why would you marry a woman if you don't want to have sex with her? Interesting. But I'm going to say it's possible. It's possible to have a long-term relationship where you stop having sex, but you still really enjoy each other's company. However, studies and personal anecdotes show that sex is an important part of bonding. That when sex is good and fulfilling, you feel immensely drawn and connected to an individual. And when the sex is not present or is not very good, distance starts to grow. So for me, it's important to have a vibrant sex life for the entirety of my marriage, the entirety of my relationship. And I really don't have much of an interest in being married and not being physically attracted to my partner. Like, I still want to be making love to them when I'm 90, ideally. You know, two little wrinkled prunes cuddled up together, massaging each other's gums. Yeah, like that sounds sweet, doesn't it? For a lot of couples, this first thing is what happens. Somebody experiences bed death. Option one. Option two is the couple tends to experience something outside of their marriage without communicating it. So someone has an affair where they are developing a relationship outside of the marriage, unbeknownst to their partner, or they might even just be having hookups, meaning they have casual sex where there's no emotional intimacy with their partners. Now, what I don't like about this is the subterfuge, that there is this going behind the partner's back. It destroys trust. And one of the key ingredients to a successful relationship is open flow and communication. So it's not something I'd encourage, but if you live in a culture where it's understood that this will be taking place, like if you, for example, come from France, it will be understood that your spouse will have a Mr. or a mistress. That's just what they do. I don't think we as Americans really function that way. We tend to hold this ideal of being fidelitous to your partner, but that is something that will happen in long-term relationships. Option three is something I personally don't know anybody who has this, which is they just spontaneously, years and decades later, still just have a fabulous sex life with no work attached to it, and they're just both fully into each other, as hot and heavy as they were when they were 19. I mean, I suppose that is an option. Like, I suppose there are people like that. I just personally don't know anyone like that. Like, I don't know anyone who's been in a decade-long or multi-decade-long relationships where they're just like, oh my god, I'm still so turned on by you as I was when I first met you. Like, usually it does ebb and flow, and more often than not ebb, and then we have to reinvigorate it somehow. And maybe those couples are able to do it through things like sex toys or lingerie or watching porn together, but to specifically just keep it between the two of you and still really be turned on, like that's amazing. I personally don't know anyone who's able to do that. So please, if that's you, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear more. And then we get to option 4. And option 4 is, from what I've read, what sex experts and people who really understand the nuances of the dynamics of sex and long-term relationships recommend, which is to be open and expressive about your needs, curiosities, and desires, and to look at how you can go about getting them outsourced. So that means finding a way to get your desires fulfilled with your partner's consent, with them absent or present, doesn't matter, but their enthusiastic support. So that might mean like going to a sex club or a bathhouse. That might mean bringing somebody into your marriage as a third or as a bull or as a whatever. It might mean having sexual experiences on the side. It might mean having another relationship that isn't shared between the partners. Now, what's hard and tricky about this is the fear that the primary relationship will dissolve, that if I open these floodgates, that me and my partner will drift apart. And I'm sure we've all heard anecdotes about so-and-so opened up their marriage and then it dissolved just a few weeks or months after that. But I want to be clear here. There's a difference between saying, hey, our relationship isn't working, I no longer like being with you as a person or as a partner, and so let's start hooking up with other people, versus saying, I still love you, I still want to be in connection with you, and I love what we have, I just want to enhance it. Those are very different things. Because one of my favorite quotes that I got from a mentor of mine is, anything that is repressed will express itself inappropriately. If you try to bury something, it's still going to be there, and it's just going to fester under the skin like an abscess. But if you can openly acknowledge it and work through it, then we can provide oxygen, space, and medicine for it to heal. So, to share a personal example, if you've been watching my YouTube series, you know that a few months ago, my husband and I decided to explore an open relationship. So we, for a few weeks, explored things both independently and together. And we discovered we really do not like the other person hooking up with somebody else, A. And B, even if we're there, we still don't like it. But B, we don't like the feeling generally of hooking up with somebody else. Like that, those experiences made us feel like, ugh, like we didn't feel nourished in the way that we do when we're with each other. And so even though we gave ourselves full permission to go out and explore, we ended up going back to being monogamous pretty much because we said, I'd rather just be with you. But what we learned through that experience reinvigorated our sex life. It made us more aware of who we are and gave us permission to ask for the things that we need. Like, it was tremendously valuable. And we didn't create a hard, fast rule to say we're never going to do that again. We said, well, if the right person shows up and something seems interesting, we can obviously talk about it and explore that if we want to, but we're not going to go out seeking it. We're just going to leave that door open and give ourselves permission to do what we need, which is ultimately what I think we need to do as partners regardless, is to say, hey, I want you to be experiencing the fullest expression of your potential, of your best life, of yourself. And if you're feeling like you're having to section off a part of you, that you have to suppress a part of you, then you're not going to be well. I want you to thrive, and whatever I need to do to support your thriving, I will do. If that means like you need to travel without me, that you need to go do something and you need that space, my love for you and my wish for your well-being far outweighs anything that I need from you, because I'm putting your needs first. And so to openly have these difficult, frank conversations where you're gonna cry, you're probably going to scream, you're probably gonna be deeply uncomfortable, and especially if you're not used to asking for getting your needs met or giving space to voice those needs without shame, it's going to be some work. But on the other side of it, you should hopefully be so much better, more healthy, more happy. Because ultimately, these are basically our 4 options: bed death, an affair, lasting monogamy that somehow just the spark stays on its own, or you acknowledge your needs and wants and find ways to get them outsourced and completed. And again, if your relationship is viable, if you are really there for each other and love each other and want the best for each other and want to be with one another, then give it the space that it needs. If you've ever tried to light a fire, it's very easy to smother the kindling. That spark can go out very easily. To let it move into a blaze, you have to give it oxygen, you have to give it room, and you have to have confidence that it's going to get there. If you are constantly micromanaging and trying to move things around and squish it, it's not going to light. So too is it with our sex lives. The more control, the more trying to push it into a box, the less it's going to be there. Sexual energy is a flowing, moving thing. You cannot try to hold it rigid. It is going to change daily, weekly, monthly. And we have to give ourselves space to feel what we're feeling and to acknowledge it, to go with it. And the best thing we can do as a partner is to have open, flowing communication without judgment, without prejudice, and to really listen. So, short answer, is monogamy possible in long-term relationships? Probably not, if you want a vibrant sex life. Long answer? It might actually be possible to have a more or less monogamous relationship as long as you're open to expressing your wants and needs and articulating them fully without shame. And then doing the same for your partner, sitting, listening, not judging what they ask for, and finding a way to help them get it fulfilled. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is all of our work. Our work is to become enthusiastically ourselves, to come home to our full selves, to accept every part of us, whether we think it's beautiful or not. Because to truly become whole, to become holy even, means that we have to bring all of what makes us us into the room. You can't be a whole person when you reject part of yourself. You're only a part of a person, a fraction of a person. So how can you give you and your partner permission to be the men or women or persons that you are, to really thrive and get your needs met and support one another with love and enthusiastic support? If this is meaningful to you, if this journey of trying to understand and come home to your full, radiant, ecstatic self, then leave a comment, subscribe, maybe check us out on Patreon, or perhaps check out my book, Journey to the Ecstatic Self. You can also work with me one-on-one in a private coaching setting, going on a 12-week journey to come home to you. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you so much for your time. Time is our most valuable resource. Once it's gone, we'll never get it back. So don't waste your years in relationships that are leaving you wishing they were otherwise. Do the hard things, speak up for your needs, and have a wildly beautiful, radiant life with people that love you. I'm Kay. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Namaste.